Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Recha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Genesis, the 4th chapter, continuing from where we left off in Genesis, the 3rd chapter, as we saw the events that transpired over a period of time with the serpent, which we know wasn't a natural snake, Adam, Eve, and the punishment that came upon them. So this is Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. And Adam knew his wife, and she conceived. And the phrase to know, right, or knew his wife, meaning that he had sex with her, and then, she got pregnant. And then after the course of pregnancy was up, she bare a son. So Eve, the wife of Adam, their firstborn was Cain. All right, which I believe in the Hebrew is Kwayan, meaning I think it's a weapon or dagger. So that was their firstborn son, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord Yahweh. And she bare again his brother Abel. So afterwards, she got pregnant again, and she had another son called Abel. And Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. So Abel was pretty much a shepherd, and Cain was like a husbandman, right? And let's look up the name Abel here. Habal, which they have here as breath, which I believe otherwise means like, I think it really means like something that's like temporary or transitory. And I guess a breath could like fall under that, right? That's an example of that. Like if it's cold outside and when you see your breath, it's only there for a second and then it disappears. So they had, they had two different paths, right? Abel being the keeper of sheep or a shepherd, and Cain being the tiller of the ground. And in process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord Yahweh. So now, at this point in time, right, we don't know how long it's been, but there came a time for an offering. Now, it doesn't specify here, what kind of offering, this was when you look at it in the sense of the way they were categorized when the Lord had them written down. But at this time, they must have already known or been taught, right, the law on sacrifice and how to properly offer an offering onto the Lord, okay, which is likely taught, also to Adam. So at this point, they come to bring an offering onto the Lord, and Cain brought fruit of the ground, as it says. So he brought some crops to offer onto the Lord. And Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. So Abel pretty much brought the some of the best, right, of his flock. When it talks about the firstlings, like how when you have a harvest, you have the first fruits, which are the first batch. So Abel brought the best of his first batch here to offer unto the Lord. And the Lord Yahweh had respect unto Abel and to his offering. Now, it doesn't specify by what means they were able to tell, but what this means is that the Lord accepted Abel's offering, right? And it was a worthy sacrifice to him. Okay, and so, whether the Lord would he gave some signal somehow, maybe he lit the altar on fire or whatever the case was, the Lord was able to let them know. So they had some way to know that their sacrifice was accepted or pleasing to the Lord or not. So we see here that the Lord respects Abel's offering, but unto Cain and his offering he had not respect. So it wasn't acceptable in the sight of the Lord. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. So Cain was pretty angry and upset about that. And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth? Now, once again, being practical, there are many scriptures where it has this phrase, and the Lord said. And when you look at the different contexts of those scriptures, 9 times out of 10, if not 10, the Lord it wasn't the Most High physically right there with them saying this to them, right? What the scriptures tend to do is they attribute disregarding in some parts, the person, the messenger here, they especially in the book of Genesis, they cut straight to the point and give you the overall message here, right? So these were the words of the Lord. This was the message the Lord wanted conveyed, but likely through a medium, which would be, a seer or a man of God or a messenger of God that he would send here to, so the Lord, seeing that Cain was very angry, sent this message on to him, you could say. And it says here, why art thou wroth? So why are you angry? And why is thy countenance fallen? And his countenance fallen, meaning he was like discouraged. He was dispirited. He was down, you could say. And because your countenance is your appearance, like usually your face. If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? So if you do good, won't you be accepted if you do right? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door. And unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. So here, this was almost like an admonishing, right? Because the response the Lord gave Cain was that if you do good, you're going to be accepted. But if you don't do what's right, as it says, if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door. And what does that mean? That means that it's waiting for you, right? It's you're going to encounter sin if you go down the path of doing wrong. Because just like when you order something, right, and it comes and they drop it at your door, one way or another, you're going to meet it when you open that door. If the cops are looking for you, what do they usually search for? Your address, right? If they can't find you, they come to your address, your last known address, and then they come to your doorstep. Why do they come to the doorstep? Because that signifies that they're seeking you, right? And they're looking for you, and you're going to encounter them because they're at your doorstep. Now, similarly, when you read in the book of Revelation, right? I'll get that real quick. The Lord uses a similar analogy, but on the right-hand side, right? I believe it's Revelation 3:20. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come in to him and will sup with him and he with me. So what door is that? Is that your apartment in Maryland somewhere? No. That door here in Revelation, that the Lord is knocking at, is the door of your mind. It's metaphorical. It's not literal. Likewise, sin lying at the door is not a literal door, but the door of your mind. Meaning when you start to do wrong, your mind is going to have, sin is going to be at your mind. It's going to be the next step that you're going to encounter. Because when you start deviating from the instructions of the Lord, the next thing you usually fall into, or let me say right behind that, is sin. And that's where temptation comes in. So here, what Cain was being told is, if you do right, you're going to be good. But if you do wrong and you don't do the right thing, you're going to end up with sin. You're going to end up sinning. You're going to end up going in that route or that direction. And unto thee shall be his desire. This is referring to sin. It's just using the pronoun of a he, meaning if you go in the wrong path, sin is going to lie at your door. Why? Because it's looking for you. And unto you shall be his desire, meaning it's going to desire you. All right. Just like wickedness desires the wicked. Sin desires sinners. Okay. So if you go in the wrong path, sin is going to desire you. It's going to come towards you. That's where your temptation comes in, because it wants to make you a sinner. Okay. It wants to consume you. It wants to control you. And thou shalt rule over him. Now, this in the Old English can introduce some confusion. This isn't necessarily like written in a prophetic sense, right? It's not written to say that, and you will rule over sin. But what it's saying here is more like sin is going to desire you, but you have to rule over it, meaning you have to overcome it. Okay, that's what you ought to do. That's basically what Cain was being told here. So when you read this, that's why when you look at this in many of the other translations, they give that same sentiment, right? In the NKJV, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it. NLT, sin is crouching at the door, eager to control you, but you must subdue it and be its master. So you don't let it take over you, right? It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. Its desire is for you, and you must rule over it. Okay, so that was the admonishment there, right? That you're angry, but your sacrifice wasn't accepted. If you had done right and offered something like what your brother offered, then you would have been good. Wouldn't you have been accepted? But if you don't, and you go in the wrong way, just beware that you're going to meet sin. Okay, it's going to come onto you, and it's going to desire to make you a sinner. It's going to desire to consume you in that path. But you're not supposed to give in to that. Now, did Cain follow this? Of course not. Okay, and we'll see exactly why as we continue on in the next verses. Because also keeping in mind, if you rule over something, you have control or dominion over it. Now, yes, Cain's descendants, right, through the reincarnation as the Edomites, have the power to, entice you to sin, but they themselves are sinners. Okay, they don't have control over sin. They themselves are also subjects, okay, of sin. So going into verse 8, after Cain was admonished, it says here, and Cain talked with Abel, his brother. So these are, time has passed, right? They went to offer their offerings, and likely this could have been the first offering too, because if you think about it, unless Cain had been offering lambs, right, like Abel in all the previous offerings, and this time he just decided to switch it up. All right, but if not, then if the Lord, if all Cain offered were the crops, why would the Lord accept it in previous times and then all of a sudden not have respect onto it this time? Unless this might have been their first, offering, or unless this might have been the first time Cain offered this. Either way it went, Cain was upset, and that that spirit of evil, that spirit entered into him. So after he's admonished, he basically, it goes over his head. It goes in one ear, it comes out the other. And in process of time, while still harboring this anger and this hate, because what he ended up doing was he directed it towards towards Abel, turning it into envy, right? Being rejected of the Lord, he looked at, well, why was I rejected, but he was accepted? Why was his sacrifice accepted of the Lord? Why did the Lord have respect onto that? And well, if the Lord is not going to respect my sacrifice, then forget him. Why should I serve him? Why should I, And then he starts to, it's kind of like, what does he have that I don't have? Then, those thoughts. And that's where sin was lying at his door knocking. And he opened the door onto sin as sin had desire for him. And instead of him overcoming it, it overcame him, as we're about to read. Verse 8, and Cain talked with Abel, his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field. So now you see there's a colon over here, meaning that this, whatever comes after, is connected to the first part before it. Now, the scriptures wouldn't just mention that Cain spoke with his brother if there was no significance behind it, because I'm pretty sure they spoke on many occasions. More than likely, what was happening here is the talking that Cain talked with his brother was to convince or to sway him to go with him to the field. Okay, whether it was, just to talk, let me just talk to you, or I want to show you something, or whatever the case is, he basically was trying to get Abel in an area where he could carry out his plan. That's why after he was, able to successfully talk his brother into going with him, it came to pass that when they were in the field, when they finally got there, now keep in mind, Cain had plotted this. So, and that's why it was murder. But he wasn't going to do this in an area where everybody can see. That's why he had to talk his brother into going into some part of the field where it would likely be just them. And once they got there, as it says, that Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and slew him. So he ended up murdering his brother. Whether he hit him in the back of the head with a rock, or he just strangled him, or whatever it was, he ended up slaying his brother. More than likely, he probably hit him with something or something like that. But he basically commits murder. It doesn't specify if he buried him or he just ran away or whatever it is, but he does this and then calls it a day. The Lord sees it and then sends on to him with the message and says, as it says, verse 9, and the Lord said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? So I don't know. He's his own man. You know, he's a shepherd. He does his own thing, right? He's been doing his own thing for, God knows how long. Why are you asking me? Am I supposed to be his guardian? Am I his bodyguard? And he said that out of guilt because he knew what he had done. And he said, and this was the reply of the Lord, what hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. And that's because the scriptures tell you that, and this is the reason as well why we're not supposed to eat blood, because the scriptures tell you that the life is in the blood. So the blood carries the life, the spirit in it. And that's why when Cain slew Abel, basically when Abel's spirit got to the spirit world, he cried unto the Lord. Basically like, hey, this is what my brother has done. And I did nothing to him. So Cain is confronted about this. And this is the judgment the Lord pronounced against him. And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thine hand. Meaning that the very earth that you spilled your brother's blood upon, you're now cursed from it. And then the Lord proceeds to go into the curse here. So now we're seeing, right, as we read, I think it's Genesis 3, the serpent was cursed. And then, some time later, you had Adam and Eve, and they had their sons. And now, of one of their sons, Cain, the Lord curses him as well. When thou tillest the ground, because remember, Cain was a tiller of the ground. So when thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. So when you go to farm, plant and harvest, you're not going to get, it's going to be terrible. You're not going to get the rich crops like you used to. It doesn't matter how well you plant or water or, prepare the the planting and all that. It doesn't matter how well you do it. And so as it says, it shall not yield unto thee her strength. The strength would be, like if you plant something and it comes out really rich and good and, it's a real good harvest, you're not going to get that. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. And when you go into those words, now this was a curse that wasn't just upon Cain, the man, but upon those that would come forth of him. Just like the curse that the Lord put upon the children of Israel in the wilderness was not just upon them, but their descendants as well. So when we go into the word fugitive, let me see, is this it? No, why? To totter, to tremble, to wander, okay, i.e. a vagabond. So what does it say here? Literally and figuratively, to go up and down, to be gone away, to be a vagabond. So he would basically be, it's like, let me see what Google has to say about a fugitive definition. It says a person who has escaped from a place or is in hiding, especially to avoid arrest or persecution. So you can see why he would become a fugitive because he had now committed a crime. He had committed murder. Therefore, from that point on, he was going to be a fugitive. He had to be on the run. He had to wander. He had to leave. Okay. And that became something that dwelt with him and his later on descendants. As you see in the scriptures, right? It tells you, I believe in Habakkuk, that he keepeth not at home. They're pretty much everywhere on the planet. In history, they were driven from among men. It tells you that in the book of Job. And then they just went all around the world from one place to another, impersonating people, all right, feigning themselves to be the Greeks, then the Romans, the Etruscans, the Mycenaeans, the all throughout. Because that was a part of the lot that they had to play, the curse that was upon them. And for the word vagabond, nawad, it says here, oh, it looks like it's very similar definition here. To cause to wander aimlessly, to show grief, to lament, to show sympathy. So this is basically somebody who is living such a life that it's like it invokes this feeling within others to see. Like, damn, I would not want to be in this guy's shoes. I would not want to be that kind of person, right? To wander, to flee, to constantly always have to be on the run. And let's look up vagabond definition here. All right, a person who wanders from place to place without a home or job. So that was a part of the curse that was put upon Cain. Where we at? A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. And Cain said unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. I mean, this judge, now he's complaining, right? The judgment is too much. The consequence of this action is too much. Behold, thou hast driven me this day from the face of the earth, meaning from this land, because what is the actual face of the earth, right? And you have like the face of the earth, meaning the entire planet, but that's not what it's referring to here. But technically, if you wanted to look at the face of the earth, you just look down at it. It'll look right back at you. Hey, what's up? Anyway, that's what he's referring to here, right? That he was being banished, right? Or driven out from that land, and from thy face shall I be hid. So if he was going to be hid from the face of the Lord, meaning the Lord wouldn't look upon him anymore. And that's why his descendants later on became bastards without the father. Okay, and it tells you that in the book of Hebrews that if you are without chastisement, then are ye bastards. And Esau, Edom, which is the Cain's descendants coming back, because remember, they died in the flood. So they came back reincarnated in the earth again through Noah. And eventually through Isaac and through Esau, right? And we believe that through the Spirit that's the line that they came from again. And they had the same mark that we're going to read on down that was put upon Cain, right? But they are not chastised, right? I believe in the book of Psalms it mentions they are not in trouble as other men. They're not chastised, but it doesn't mean they won't be punished. Chastisement is to make you better. Okay, your parents chastise you because they want what's best for you. They want to correct you. If they don't chastise you, they're doing you more harm than they're doing you good. So that's why it mentions those that are not chastised are like bastards. And so Cain became a bastard because the Lord, as it says, he would be hid from the face of the Lord. The Lord wouldn't look upon him anymore. And I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth. I.e., he would have to be, like we just went into those words, like an excommunicated, right? A wanderer, one that is outcasted. And it shall come to pass that every one that findeth me shall slay me. So he feared here that because of what he has done, anybody that came across him and encountered him would want to kill him. And that this was going to be too much for him to to have to deal with and have to bear. That would also be one of the reasons why he would have to constantly go from place to place. And the Lord Yahweh said unto him, therefore whosoever, since you're complaining about this, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold, meaning 7 times more. Now, it didn't say here that nobody can slay Cain, but it says anybody who slays Cain, the revenge that will be had upon them would be 7 times more. And that was actually a spirit that the Lord put upon Cain and and his descendants. This is why, if you and we actually see this exemplified in Lamech, which was one of Cain's descendants, in the song that he sung to his wives. And what this means is, if you step on their shoe, they'll burn down your house. Okay, if you insult him and he's offended, he'll kill your whole family. If you bomb a couple of boats on his harbor, he'll drop an atomic bomb on you. 7 times more. That's the spirit that would be put upon him, and this would be somewhat of like a protection or a means of preservation, because then people would think twice before wanting to go and mess with Cain, because they know the vengeance that will come upon them would be sevenfold. And the Lord Yahweh set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. So in addition to the curse here, the Lord put a mark upon him that would be that indicator here. These are the people that's Cain, and they're descendants of him. They're the ones that were cursed because of what they did. You watch out for them, right? Now, the mark here, we believe here that the mark that the Lord put upon Cain was leprosy, because at this time, everybody on the earth was brown skin, some shade of brown. And so in order to set Cain apart, so people would be able to recognize and know what he has done and who he is, as it says, lest any finding him should kill him, the Lord put a mark of leprosy upon him. So his skin, his pigment changed. And when you go into the word mark, it says here, a wath. It says a signal, a distinguishing mark. Okay. And this was to separate or have him stand out from everybody else. A sign. And when you look at the root word, right, it says here, probably from awath, H225, in the sense of appearing. So this mark would have to be something dealing with the appearance, because how else would people be able to tell and know, or how else would Cain be set aside? They can't see his mind. They can't see the curse the Lord put on him, because that's something that was told him. That's something that would take effect on him. But the Lord had to put a mark that was visible to be an indicator for others. All right. And that's why he was hit with that leprosy. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord, i.e., he was banished. So this shows you that there were regions, right, in on the planet, and the region where Adam and Eve and basically the family of the sons of God and so on and so forth dwelt. Cain was kicked out from there. Now, yeah, Adam and Eve were, when you read in Genesis 3, they were kicked out, but from a certain part, meaning the Lord drove them away from having access to the region, the part where they dwelt, where the tree of life was. But they still dwelt in that region. And so here, Cain was completely ousted from there. And as it says, and dwelt, so he basically had to leave and dwelt in the land of Nod. When you go into the word Nod, it goes into a wandering. All right. And being a fugitive, what did he do? He had to go and basically wander off and find an area. He found a different land, which you had people there as well. Remember, Adam and Eve were not the only people on the planet Earth at this time. So he goes over there, goes and settles there, as it says, on the east of Eden. So more east from where he was originally dwelling. And Cain knew his wife. See, so there he had a wife. Now, where would he have gotten his wife from? This wife would not have been a daughter. Right now, at this point, we know that Adam and Eve only have Cain and Abel. Abel is dead now. So it's not like they had another child, which would have been a woman. So there had to be a woman somewhere else for Cain to have a wife and know her, meaning he laid with her, got her pregnant, and she conceived and bare Enoch. So he goes over to the east, to that area in the land of Nod, and he gets a wife, eventually in process of time, and he has children. And as it says here, his firstborn son was Enoch, and afterwards Cain built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. And unto Enoch was born Irad, and Irad begat Mehujael, and Mehujael begat Methusael, and Methusael begat Lamech. Now there's some interesting names in here, right? If we look here at Irad, the meaning of his name, Irad, here says fleet. But I believe this is more so in like somebody who is like to flee, right? Rather than like a fleet of things or people. And when you look at the Strong's definition, it says here, right, a fugitive. So interestingly enough, that, you know, he was Cain was hit with this curse, and you can see how his descendants, that it's like nomen omen, right? It's in their names. So you have the name Irad, which here goes into fleet, and then it says here, and Irad begat Mehujael. That's also an interesting name there, right? Macha Yaal, or Wayaal, and it says here what? Smitten by God, right? And you have here the word Macha, which is to wipe out, to blot out, to exterminate. And then you have Allah, Macha Ya'ala, smitten by God. So you have Irad, you have Mehujael, and then you have Mehujael begat Methusael, which here is Mathawa Sha'ala, who is of God. So definitely some interesting names here. Continuing on. And Lamech took unto him 2 wives. The name of one was Ada, and the name of the other Zillah. And Ada bare Jabal. He was the father of such as dwell in tents, and of such as have cattle, meaning, you know, he basically started that, I guess you could say, trend. Not that people weren't doing it before, but he sort of became chief in that, right? And those that after him that followed suit, which was like their specialty, let's put it that way. And this is kind of like nomadic kind of a vibration, right? Because they dwell in tents, because tents are easier to pack up and set up anywhere else. And when you have cattle, you do have to move, all right, from place to place to find good pasture for them. And his brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all such as handle the harp and organ. So they were good or specialized in music, right? In some of these instruments here, specifically as it listed, the harp and organ. And Zillah also bare Tubal Cain, which in the Hebrew is Thawabal Kwayan. Now, when you actually go into the blue letter, they don't really give you the full correct meaning of it, but we know what Kwayan means, which is Cain, right? Which is like a weapon. But they do give you the Thawabal, which here says apparently from Yabal, compare Yabawa'al, which I believe this is the root word of the Thawabal. But when you look into it, you have here to bring, to carry, right? To bear along, to be born, something that is carried. And you'll see why his name has that. So it says here, and Zillah, she also bare Tubal Cain. So like carrying a weapon or weapon carrier, whatever you want to call it when you put those two together. An instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. So he specialized in the making of these tools, which weapons are also included in that, because they're also made of brass and iron. spears, and different tools. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. And if we read this in another translation, in the NLT, right, I think it words it a bit clearer. Lamech's other wife, Zillah, gave birth to a son named Tubal-Cain. He became an expert in forging tools of bronze and iron. Tubal-Cain had a sister named Naamah. And Lamech said unto his wives. Now remember, going back to the what the Lord said in response to Cain saying that anybody who saw him would want to slay him, right, about the vengeance. Adah and Zillah, so these were the wives of Lamech, and he basically sings this song unto them. Hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech, hearken unto my speech, or song, poem, whatever. For I have slain a man to my wounding, meaning a man wounded him, and as a result, he killed him. And a young man to my hurt. He was hurt by a young man, and in result, he slew him. Now it doesn't go into exact details of what kind of wound it was, but based on the next verse, you can see that this was his mindset, which was that he might not necessarily have had to slay them, but he did anyway, because he was of the line of Cain. And so, as he goes on to say, if Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold, right? So if Cain, which is their forefather, would be avenged if anybody tried to slay him 7 times more, then truly for Lamech, he's saying he would be avenged 70 times 7. That's why by being wounded, he slew him. Okay, and he was basically using this to exemplify that, or to, I guess you could call it boasting in the fact that he did that to them. And that's why I mentioned what I mentioned concerning that spirit the Lord put on them in that verse. And you can see the same characteristic and trait has stayed with their line all the way up until now, till today. All right, through them coming back as the Edomites. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son. Now, they kind of show this in almost in a humorous way when you watch some movies, right? And you find a very sick and twisted villain, and it's like he's doing the most, literally. Like, he's basically doing, I don't even know how to describe it, trying to destroy the whole planet. And you find out the backstory and get to the core of it, and it turns out that when he was a kid, he wanted an autograph, and the person he looked up to didn't give him an autograph. And now the whole world has to die. You know? It says here, I was going to say something concerning, another example is Haman, right? What happened when he felt disrespected because Mordecai wouldn't give him reverence? At that point, he seeks to exterminate all the Jews. But that's like a combination of that plus, that enmity that was put between the seed of the serpent and that of the woman. Verse 25, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son. So in process of time, Eve ended up bearing another son to Adam and called his name Seth, which I believe when you go into that word, here they have it as, is it compensation? Not son, Seth. Shath. Yeah, compensation or recompense. For she said, he hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, like almost like she was compensated for losing her son Abel, whom Cain slew. See, so they knew word eventually, all right, they obviously found out what had happened, and that's why Cain had to be driven, had to basically be kicked out, and had to go and dwell in another land. And to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord Yahweh. Now, this doesn't mean that this was when men first started, because they knew the name of the Lord, okay? But it was now at this point that they started to let's just say wholly, worship the Lord, right, on a different level, right? So when it mentions, I think one of the translations uses Yeah, okay, NLT, right? When Seth grew up, he had a son named Enos. At that time, people first began to worship the Lord by name. Okay, so it's not that they didn't, because if they didn't know the name of the Lord, how are they going to then begin to worship him by name? Right? But they started to become, more and more acquainted with the Lord, because this was now the establishing of the line of the sons of God. And that brings us to the end of the book of Genesis, the 4th chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. Closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Recha Kodesh. And until next time, Shalom.